Welcome to Not a Great Whisperer podcast. This is your host, Katy Ray. I interview ordinary people living extraordinary lives, and I have basically my new best friend, Tom Doherty, on today. And he is just going to talk all the things because he has a very similar mindset like me, that humans matter and people matter and all that fun stuff. So we're just kind of digging into his life and his journey. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much, Katy. I'm so excited that Kathy Slayton introduced us.
I am too.
It's funny sometimes when people introduce you, they say, oh my God, you got to meet this person. It doesn't always work out. But I can say in this case, it totally worked out.
Totally worked out. You're just amazing. I think talking with you and just through your life, you've been through a lot of hard times, but you maintain that positive attitude. You maintain see people at their core, be good to people kind of thing. And I love that about you. Can you, if you had to explain yourself, if I hit you on the shoulder in the street, also you wouldn't fight me, but you come from a background, you could have because he's from Boston. But if you we were in it, who are you? Who's Tom?
I think Tom is somebody who doesn't believe in, taking setbacks and being held back. When I look back at all the years, the thing that I'm most proud of is that I wanted to change my story. I wanted to get out of the movie that I was in. I heard someone explain that, and it totally made sense to me. I felt like I was in the wrong movie. What is going on? Why are these people behaving this way? I want to go forward and do good things and be a good person and, celebrate the best that's in the world. Because I do believe the best is out there. Don't believe the news. Don't believe the negativity. If you go out and you travel and you see people are good and there is good in the world. Go find it.
Did you go find it? I mean, you came from a pretty hard childhood, but how were you able to see your childhood and see now and get to where you are?
I think I got really lucky, even though people would say, is it lucky that your parents got divorced or that there was, strife and challenge and all this craziness that went on at that time. But my parents did get divorced and my father ran off to California. And I didn't know where he was. Nobody knew where he was. He just disappeared for a year. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden he called and he was in Hermosa Beach, California. And slowly but surely, my mother got convinced to let me go on a family trip. When I was 10 years old, I got to fly out to California during the wintertime of Boston, right? When I left Boston, it was 20 degrees, freezing, winter cold, gray. And I left the projects in Somerville, Massachusetts, and landed in LAX. It was 75 degrees. I was at my aunt's house that had orange trees in the backyard, and I was seeing palm trees for the first time, and it just blew my mind and opened up this whole new world. And the other thing that really, really struck me about coming to California was all of a sudden I was exposed to all these different people that I wasn't exposed to in my hometown. My hometown was 99% white, and I never had a lot of interactions with any other race. So all of a sudden, I'm here in California for the first time. I'm meeting Hispanics. I'm meeting Asians. You're seeing all these different communities. So that just opened up this thirst for travel and for difference. So when I came back to Boston, I knew right then and there, this is not going to be my world. I want more. I want to see more. I want to do more. And as I started to play sports and started to grow and started to travel, I found myself attracted and drawn to all these different people. And luckily, when I got to high school, that became a great skill because, when you have all different parts of the city come together, all of a sudden you have all these different ethnicities, all these different groups. Well, I earned the nickname the Diplomat in high school because I could get along with anybody from any group. I could talk to anyone.
Yeah. That's awesome. I didn't know you were named the Diplomat. I will start calling you that. It'll be great. But with athletics and things like that, you were in Boston for how long until you finally moved?
I was in Boston all the way through. I spent a year with my father when I was in high school. It didn't go that well, so I ended up back in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, I ended up back in Boston. And I was there until I relocated. I took my first relocation offer to move to Seattle.
Oh, wow.
And my friends and family were like, "You're going to do what?" But I was young. I had a young family, and they came along and they said, "Hey, how would you take a relocation to Seattle to start up this new division for Pitney Bowes?" I'm like, I was 20 something years old. I was like, "How does that work?" They're like, "Oh, we'll pay you to move out there. We'll help you sell your house. We'll help you buy a new house. We'll have you do all this stuff." And I was like, "Well, I'm not going to get that in Boston." So here I was. I moved my young family out to Seattle, and I ended up at Microsoft. I worked at the Microsoft campus for 2 years. And it just blew the doors open on my career and career opportunities because everybody knew who I was. I was the guy that moved from Boston to Seattle.
Yeah.
I put Microsoft on the map. Everybody knew who I was. Yeah. And not only at the company, but also in the industry, people started to know who I was.
And from your accent, they also know who you were. But for that, I mean, I think that's a perfect example. Like sometimes, in your heart, you should be somewhere else. It might not be the last spot, Seattle, but you knew that this opportunity. I did,
and I took the adventure, right? Here I was in Seattle, never been there before. So I set up all these trips. I went to Snoqualmie Falls. I went to Eastern Washington. I went hiked, all the different mountains and took all the different trails. I drove to Vancouver, right? All these things I didn't have any experience with. But I found it interesting that I got so much flack for taking that opportunity from my family and friends. If I had listened to them, I should have never gone. But then on top of that, what was the worst that could happen? I said to them, "What's the worst that could happen? I'll come back."
Yeah. And that's hard. People's opinions, right? How we have to drown these out often.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now? What's your whole thing now? What's Born to Matter is my jam. Your whole, it's basically like your mantra. What is it? Like your theme?
Yeah, I came up with Born to Matter a number of years ago. I've always heard this common theme amongst folks that work for me. I've always heard, "You're the best leader I've ever had. You're the best manager I've ever had." But I always took it with a grain of salt. Isn't that what you're supposed to tell your boss? "Oh my God, your boss, you're great," right?
No, I'm great.
Good, right. But I started to ask the question, why? Why do you say that? Why do you think that? Give me an example. And what I heard over and over again was, you make people feel like they matter and that they belong here and that you really care. And that made me think back to when I was a younger manager. I took this approach was, I don't care just about the 8 hours a day you work for me. I care about the 24 hours a day that you work for me. So if you have serious stuff going home and outside of work, if you were willing to share and wanted my help, I offered to help. And I genuinely cared. And what I found was, man, that created raving fans for me. People that would run through brick walls for me.
I know. And it makes you happy and also sad that they never had that. Who is that for you?
It is very hard to hear those stories. I had one guy that came to work for me early in my management career. He was a deaf guy. And at the time, they said, my boss said, "Hey, listen, you got to interview this guy. He's kind of a troublemaker, but you got to give him a token interview." Was kind of the conversation. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. A token interview, So I sat down with this man and I had a conversation with him. I sat face to face with him. I'm pretty demonstrative when I talk, and I was engaged with him. And we had this great conversation. And I was wondering, why is this guy considered such a problem? So towards the end of the interview, I said, "So tell me about your last assignment. Why do you think that, you need to come here?" And he said, "Well, my manager just doesn't understand me, some of the needs that I have. I need people to face me when they talk. I need to be able to get direction a certain way, blah, 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 right?" So after the interview, I called my boss and I said, "I love John. I want him to work for my team." And he was like, you want John? I'm like, "Yeah." I said, "Hey, listen, I don't know what Cal's doing over there, but I'm happy to take John on." Oh. John came to work for me. The guy was a workhorse. Not only did he crush it at where I was at Sheridan, he went on to win all kinds of different awards. And when I got promoted later on, and I took over another group with a national group with Hewlett Packard, John came with me, another great person to follow me along. And guess what? He continued to be awesome, which made me look good, and it made me feel good to be connected to him.
I didn't think I like you anymore until right now. What a great story. It gave me goosebumps because I love stuff like that. You saw the person who they are at their core. Just because someone else didn't want to listen or do, like try to just manage him how he needed to be managed. It was like they made him out to be this bad. I hate that so much. I love that story.
It really broke my heart too, because he really wanted to do well and to please and to work hard. And when I heard the stories from him late, of course, like that was the interview story, right?
Yeah.
Then as we got to know each other, he would tell me stories that his former manager would tell him what to do behind his back and then write him up for not doing an assignment. Just insanity.
Oh, no, no.
Right. How can you succeed in that environment?
No.
You can't.
No. Where's Cal at? I need to make a phone call. I'm just kidding. But yeah, you're right. And you just give, like I always say, like people might look bad on paper, but who they are in their heart is what matters. And that's like a perfect example of something, they write them up, they have this file and they're coming to you and you're just like, what is this crap? Okay, well, this is great. And don't worry, we're explicit. So if you have to throw the F-bomb or something, Tom, we're here for it. You are from Boston. Yeah. So how many kids do you have?
I have 4 children. I have 3 that are grown and off the payroll at 30, 28, and going to be 24 later this year. And then my daughter is coming up on her 16th birthday.
16. And 3 boys and a girl.
Correct.
So cool. 3 older brothers living their life. 3 off the payroll is how you.
I tell you, best job I ever had, best role I ever had. And again, you can take things the way, like my father was not a good father. He wasn't a good person. He was very challenging in a lot of different ways. But you know what? He made me the father that I am because I really wanted that type of attention. I wanted that concern. I wanted that care. And I wanted to be connected. And it's funny, people have met my boys. They'll always say, oh my God, how did you get so lucky? Your boys are so kind and they're so polite and they're so this and they're, how did you do it? There's no real rocket science to it. It's hard work. And then you need to love them and you need to be with them. So I know I coached baseball and football for a long time. And it's so funny. You can always tell the parents that had kids to check a box and the parents that had kids because they love kids, right? Yes. And I do truly love kids and I truly did enjoy that time with them.
And I love that too. But you also put up a case of you can have a parent that is not healthy towards you and then one that is, but you still get you from, it's like, wait a second. Yeah. So some people are like, wait a second though, but your dad wasn't great too. But yeah, I think that's great.
You also have to understand where people struggle, right? I mean, I look back at the time, you don't know any better because, you see the different issues at hand and the different challenges you're having. But as you get older and your vision gets a little wider, my father was 17 years old when he got my mother pregnant. He had to get permission from his parents to get married. He didn't graduate high school. You look at all those challenges. 2 months after I was born, his dad died, right? Mm-hmm. Then a year after that, unfortunately, his brother committed suicide and killed his wife. And my father was the one that found them, right? So you start to see all these traumas and all these things that piled up on him. Yeah, you know what? He wasn't prepared to be a good father. No matching.
No. And that's why, and you just take it from, again, here comes your diplomat title, right? You just see the bigger picture. Even though it did harm you as a child, like as an adult, I always say like as an adult, it's our job to heal what might have happened and you've done it for yourself. So you could see the big picture. But I think that's also what makes you so good at kids or like volunteering with children and having your children. And because you were that kid on the other end.
Yeah,
it's really important.
it gives you a different, I always thought I was an empathetic person up until like through a certain age. But then like empathy went into overdrive when both my parents took their own lives in my 30s. I used to say things look black and white, right? You're either doing it or you're not, right? I discounted the shades of gray. But I want to say after in those years, those 30 years, I started, you need to analyze the shades of gray because there are reasons maybe why things go certain ways, so.
And how you were in your 30s, you were back home in Boston at the time?
I was in Boston at the time. We had just moved back from Maryland. I was running a region in Maryland. We were happily living in Maryland for 5 years. And one of the things I do, I have a hero complex, right? So my Uncle Pat had passed away tragically, and my dad and my grandmother were left to kind of fend for themselves. And they really couldn't fend for themselves. They just weren't capable. And I thought it was my responsibility to up my family and move back to Boston and take over that role. And I did that. And I jumped back into that mix. And sadly, it ended. A short period of time after that. I was coaching baseball and I got the telephone call and what happened. So
yeah,
my dad was in a downward spiral, which is an interesting story because when I was younger, I've always been this mature. No one's told me what to do since I was 8 years old, right?
Yeah.
So I've always been this mini adult that's always been moving through life. And I was always trying to coach my parents and always trying to help them. And it's always a frustrating thing when you're really good at helping other people, but you can't help your own family, right? You can't help your own parents.
The worst, yes.
Yeah, it's the worst. And when I was in my 20s, I had said to my father, you can't keep this up. Like you have to slow down. And his head snapped around. He's like, what are you talking about? And I said, Dad, you can't keep drinking. You can't keep partying. You can't keep this up for the next, 20, 30 years. This like, you got to start to slow down. He said to me, do I look like the type of guy that's going to allow you to change my diaper or push me around in a wheelchair? He's like, I'm going out at 50, just like my father did. And I'm not planning on going any further than that. And of course, I was devastated. And I said, Dad, but what about me? And what about your grandchildren? Mm-hmm. Don't you want to continue to have like impact and be with us? And he was like, if it happens, it happens. But Tommy, I am going to enjoy every damn day that I can. And I'm going to move forward. And it'll probably be over when I'm 50. Sadly enough, he did. He took his life when he was 50.
It was already in his head.
It was. And he was in a downward spiral. The wheels started to come off about when he was 47. And he had this like just slippery slope on down that really left him. If it wasn't for my grandmother, he would have been homeless.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really hard, especially with the hero complex to know. I mean, he had already made his decision. Like it was nothing you could have come in and do. But again, you're a child that wants to help your family. I mean, it's like, there's no win-win to this. And when your mom died by suicide a few months after?
No, about 6 years later. My mother took it very hard, very hard. It was very strange. Katy, they became friends at the end, which was really weird.
And it's crazy though, but it also, I think that's a part of your personality too. Like the past can be really ugly. Like it can be really ugly, but we're here now. And how can we make it right?
The relationship between the two of them was so toxic for so long. And like, they couldn't stand each other. They didn't talk to each other. It was bad. Right. But then at like near the end, when my father moved back to Boston, I remember coming home to my grandmother's house because I always did the shopping and I like did all the errands, right? I came in one day with a couple of bags of groceries and my mother and my father were sitting at the kitchen table having a drink.
Laughing.
What Twilight Zone episode did I just walk into?
And you laugh. It was probably so just like, what the hell? And you had to like walk back out and walk back in and you're like, I'm sorry. What?
I'll tell you. And after that, they would still hang out. They would go to lunch together. My mother would take him shopping, buy him clothes. They would play old music together. Like, I'm glad that they had a chance to reconcile before it ended, to just kind of bury the hatchet. And I think it was devastating to my mother when he did take his own life. You know?
I mean, that's a huge part of her life.
Yeah.
Because how old were you when they divorced?
I was 9 when he left. Mm-hmm. So they were probably divorced. I know they were divorced in absentia when I was like 10 or 11.
Yeah. Wow. I know, but it's just your attitude and just the way you live life is just so inspiring, with some very, really sad stuff that you've had to go through. I think that's a perfect, it sucks to hear where people come from sometimes, because you're like sad about it, but then you're like, gosh, you're literally that person because of it.
Yeah, I don't, people ask me that. It's funny. People ask me, oh my God, what would you do differently? What would you change? I said, nothing. You know, what can you do? You have to do the best you can with the circumstances you're dealt. And I always thought this, I had an epiphany in 5th grade, which sounds really strange. But here I was in 5th grade, and I was just like, again, this is not my movie. This isn't my story. And my 5th grade teacher was going to keep me back because I missed so much school, right? My parents didn't get up on time, and I was fairly smart, right? I would look at the clock and go, oh, if I just wait 15 more minutes, I won't have to go to school. So then, because my mother would get up and say, oh, it's too late, just stay home, right? I'd be like, oh, no.
Okay, I can't believe it. Oh,
awesome. Yeah. Well, this one teacher in 5th grade, though, he wasn't having it. And my mother went up to the school for a conference with him, and she batted her eyes at him and, you know, did all that stuff. And I learned later that Mr. Coakley was gay. So that didn't work, right? So my mom is like flustered that she's not getting her way, right? Because she's used to like being able to get her way.
Isn't going to work.
And here's the key phrase. He said, Tommy is a smart kid, but he's not in school. And when he's not in school, he can't be effective. I'm going to promote him to 6th grade, but I've already talked to Mr. Severino. And if he misses more than 2 to 3 days in the first semester or any semester after that, we're going to bring him back to 5th grade. Now, back when I was in 5th grade, you were considered retarded if you were kept back. That was a stigma back then. Oh. If you kept back, you were considered, there was something wrong with you. That snapped a number in my head that said, oh, I'm responsible. I need to take care of me. So from then on, I set my own alarm clock. I made my own lunch. I laid my own clothes out. I was up every day an hour before school. I was either shooting hoop, throwing a tennis ball against the wall, or running around with my friends. And for the first time, I got all A's in classes, you know, because I was actually there.
Yeah, because I was effective because I was there. Yeah, I mean, that teacher gave you your epiphany, really.
Yeah, he really did. He really did.
Wow. It didn't work because he was gay. Sorry, Ma.
Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, Mom. But you know what? I'm the same way. Like, I wouldn't change anything either. I think it makes us who we are. But it's crazy when people do look at your life and they say, what would you change? And you're like, nothing. But what's cool is, what do you want to, because you've achieved so much where you're at, like, what's something you see in your future that you really want to do?
So right now it's interesting. I'm studying to be a docent at the zoo, at the Oakland Zoo. Yes. I love the animals. I love the conservation message. I love the work that these guys are doing work all over the world, right? To rescue, whether it's elephants or chimpanzees or wolves, you name it. And I fell in love with the whole process. So I'm very much looking forward to being a docent and teaching people about conservation and about the animals. But that engagement in the public, I think, is so important as well. When you have young people come out to the zoo and they see animals, because originally when I went there, I'm not a big zoo fan, right? I hate seeing animals in cages. I hate seeing animals, you know, as
I want to save them all.
I want to save everybody, right? But when you learn that it's a conservation zoo, that all those animals have been rescued, or that they can't be re-released into the wild. And you understand the different things that humans are doing to impact that. It's very powerful. So.
Well, yeah, and it's something new for you. I think you're someone who probably enjoys new stuff, but I definitely see more people for you to impact. I think it's very important. And when you're dosing, don't you speak to the people about what's going on with the animals? So you have more people to chat with. Okay. Then
you have opportunities to give them the conservation message. You can also answer questions about the animals and how they can help or change their behavior to help.
Yeah. And your wife was the one who found this for you.
Actually, I did.
Oh, you found it, and then you brought her.
Yeah. What happened was, it's actually
husband of the year
story. Yeah. She usually sets up what we do, right? She comes up with the plans.
Yeah.
And she said to me this one Saturday, "Hey, we're going to the zoo." I was like, "What? What am I, 12? Like, I don't want to go to the zoo." Like, and I did the usual, bitching and moaning thing. Like, "Oh, I don't want to go, blah, blah, blah," right? I'm like a bad kid. And so we go to the zoo, and I'm stunned. This zoo is amazing. It's 5 miles from our house. We were literally there in like 15 minutes. You get to take a tram up to the top of the zoo, which gives you the view of the entire Bay Area, which is gorgeous. And then I walked around and I got to see all the animals and interact with the docents. And you just feel this energy and this thing that's going on. So I was so engaged by it. I posted on LinkedIn with a picture. I put up how great it was. And I tagged the CEO telling him what a great job he does at the zoo.
Tom using his social media skills, killing it.
He responds. He thanks me for coming to the zoo. And then he says, "With your energy and your enthusiasm, you should look into our docent program." So I did.
First of all, you do have very, very, very contagious enthusiasm. So
well, he was very nice. I did look into the program. The program it's nothing to sneeze at. It's been 13 weeks of studying biology and zoology. I've given up my last 13 Saturdays to go do this. But after the orientation, I was even more engaged in it. I came home. I know that Maki loves animals too. And I said, "You have to go to the next orientation. I think you should consider being a docent too." And it was funny. Her first thing was, "No, I can't do it because English is my second language. They won't want me." And I said, "I don't think that's true. And I think you should give it a shot." And she did. She will be, if she graduates with me next Saturday after our exam, she will be the first English as a second language docent to graduate.
Look at her. Yes. You're the happiest husband. It's so fucking cute.
Yeah.
You're like, "Yeah, Maki."
It was great. I got to tell that story to the CEO this past Saturday. If you look at my LinkedIn today, you'll see a post with him.
I'm gonna go look. I'm gonna do it. I will like that post. I love that. You're just awesome. I want to know if you had a slew of like 20-year-olds in front of you, just 20-year-olds, what would the advice you give them?
The advice would be around the Born to Matter message for sure. Look for the good. Don't be afraid to share your gifts with the world. They're in there. You were born to matter. You do matter. You have purpose. And I think so many 20-year-olds today have so much distraction between social media and bullying and the stuff they hear in the news. And they have this quick attention span over what's important. And I think these clips and these short things, they don't do them justice to really, really be able to realize that they do have gifts and they do have the ability to make a difference in the world.
Oh, yeah, they do. I love that message. I think you're amazing. How do we find you, Tom? If I was like, I want to learn more about Tom, where do I find him?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's one of my favorite places to be.
No one will show up at your house. Don't worry.
No,
Just worry.
That's okay. And the other piece, so I condensed myself down to 2 social media platforms in the last year. One of them is LinkedIn, because I think it's a phenomenal platform. I just told you what a great story of connecting to the CEO at the Oakland Zoo, right? The second, and you know what,
a younger generation doesn't realize that. I hate to interrupt you on that, but because like, if you want to network yourself, LinkedIn really is. It's not quick clips. It's like backgrounds of what they're doing and like business wise or growth wise or just who they are. Is kind of get a little bit more of like who they are in their everyday rather than like a picture on IG or like, like, what I'm saying? I feel like
I'll tell you, it's another great piece of advice. If you're 20 something years old, the first thing you should do is get on LinkedIn, even if you're in college. Being able to post in that professional environment and see what else is going on and being able maybe to tag a professor or maybe tag someone else in some of these items. I've seen recently a couple of young folks, and I've been loving on their content because they are 20 years old and they're in college and they're trying to make experience and they're trying to learn. And that's the way that you do that, is invite them in and bring them in and help them through that scenario. Because I do think it's a mistake that we make today, right? I hate to say it, but here we are when kids are 15 years old. We're like, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? You have to pick your college when you're 16. You have to figure out what your life's going to be. You have to have this map, right? No, you don't have to have a map. I wish that we did have like 1 year of national service. I think it would be great. I think if you graduated high school, you did a year of community service or national service, I think it'd be great because it gives you a chance to grow up. But go to community college or go to trade school, right? Whatever is your thing, go there. Again, 2 more years to learn, 2 more years to grow and figure out the direction you want to go in.
And experience it instead of having all these like burnout spots that you're, even with athletes, just because your kid started playing a sport since 7 doesn't mean they have to go pro.
And I tell you, that was the worst part about coaching is the parents.
Always. My sister quit travel ball too. She's just like, I can't do this with the parent. Like, I can't.
And I was coaching before social media. I can't even imagine.
Oh God,
can you imagine today? And I just went to a game. One of my neighbors invited me to go see their son at a Little League game. The parents are up there. They're all lined up against the fence with their phones, recording Johnny taking swings at the plate. Johnny's 7.
Johnny's always Johnny too. Every kid is always Johnny.
Right? Johnny, come on, get that elbow up. Johnny, you got to swing down. Johnny, pay attention. Like,
I know.
One kid was in the outfield and he came back with flowers for his mom. Right? She's like, see, my kids are paying attention. I'm like,
it's okay. They got you flowers. I would have been flowers.
They still love you, Mom.
Flowers. I used to get rocks from Jaden. He doesn't play anymore because he's like, I don't like this. But he would grab me rocks and he's like, look what I got out there. And I was like, good for you. How many did we get? All right.
And that's normal, by the way. That's
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's no way they're going to sit down and it's crazy. And you're right. And you have LinkedIn and I think you have IG, right?
I do have IG. You can find me at Born to Matter on IG. And the way that you spell that is born, the number 2, and then matter.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's great. I mean, humans first, you're born to matter. We're just changing the world.
That's it.
One slogan at a time.
One slogan, one person at a time. I mean, you can only have, if you can have impact on one person, isn't that more important than having 100,000 followers who just check your box? That doesn't matter.
And I've gotten, and people will be like, oh, why do you have more followers? I know everyone that follows me.
Right.
Like, I don't need, like, that's not my thing is not, let me make sure I get 12K tomorrow. And people are in that like mode. I'm like, I can't. And you have to like reevaluate though, because people get in your head and you're like, get back to what matters. It's work every day. You're like, it's your core, get back in there. Well, but I feel like you've mastered that.
Yeah. And there's a great documentary on HBO where they take some like average kids and they basically buy bots and buy likes and buy all this other stuff to turn them into an influencer. And it's insanity. It is absolute insanity what happens to these poor kids that are living this fake dream, doing this influencer stuff. That's not real. That's not real life.
We're just going to keep chatting, living our life. Can't wait to see your next chapter. Thank you for being a part of this show. Not a Great Whisper. It's just a dream to interview you. Can't wait till we meet in real life. But you're amazing. Thank you for joining today, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Katy.